players to start and sit in week 2. Let's get it started. You know we gotta start with the most important position, quarterback. Start Jared Goff. Jared Goff had a solid outing against Kansas City last week, and they go against Seattle this week, who allowed Matthew Stafford to throw over 300 yards to guys named Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell. We're not talking about Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is gonna eat. Sit Dak Prescott. And it's not just because he had an awful game last week and got you 6 fantasy points. But that didn't help. Dak Prescott's defense is incredible, but so are the Jets' defense. There's a solid chance that this is a very defensive matchup and it's low scoring. Now there's always a shot that the defense turns the ball over in plus territory and Dak could throw a touchdown. But what's more likely to happen is Tony Pollard's gonna be running the ball, both defenses are gonna play well, and it's gonna be fairly low scoring. That's why the over-under is at 38.5. That's really low. You don't want to start quarterbacks in a matchup where the over-under is less than 40. That's a bad sign. Very minimal upside, and y'all know that the downside is 6 points. I got 3 sleepers for you. For those of you in deeper leagues that's always saying, there's nobody on my waiver wire. These guys really might be on your waiver wire. Brock Purdy is consistent. He's gonna give you 2 touchdowns and 200 yards because that's kind of what Brock Purdy does. Look at Brock Purdy's last 6 weeks of the regular season last year. 2 touchdowns, 200 yards. 2 touchdowns, almost 200 yards. 2 touchdowns, 200 yards. That's kind of what Brock Purdy does. Brock Purdy's gonna get you 2 touchdowns and 200 yards with possible upside because he could always throw for 3. He could always throw for 250, 275. But if you need a consistent quarterback that's gonna get you solid points, Brock Purdy's your guy. Now, if you want to dig a little deeper, we can go to the quarterback 2 of last week, who is definitely on your waiver wire because nobody believes in Mac Jones. But Mac Jones showed out last week against the Philadelphia Eagles defense, which we think is good, but they really weren't great against Minnesota. They really weren't great against the Patriots. So I think the ruling's still a little bit out. Now, they've been banged up, so I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, but the Eagles haven't been looking as great as last year. I'm still holding out hope they're gonna be great, but jury's still out. Anyways, back to Mac Jones. Mac Jones had over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. Now, he did throw the ball 54 times, which I don't think is gonna happen, or will it? He plays Miami this week, and we saw what Tua and Tyreek Hill just did to the Chargers. Now, I don't think old Bill Belichick's gonna allow that to happen, but there's always a chance that Tyreek Hill sneaks on back there. And if this becomes a shootout in any way, shape, or form, Mac Jones is gonna have to throw that thing. So I think he could be a solid start this week. And we're going back to Baker. He was okay last week, not gonna lie. 16 fantasy points, finished 13th, and he was better in a 6-point scoring touchdown league. But Chicago is not a scary defense. I think that we have another good game. I think he can throw for 250 and 2 and be a solid ad for you. Now, guys, these are sleepers. These are people that you probably aren't gonna start. But if you're desperate looking at the waiver wire, if you got to pick from the bottom of the barrel, Baker might be your guy. Wide receivers to start and sit in week 2. Start Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin had an okay game last week, 5 receptions for 51 yards, but the Chicago defense does not scare me, and I think he can get into the end zone this week. I like Godwin for a bounce back. Sit Terry McLaurin. Terry had a bad week last week, 2 receptions for 31 yards. He's obviously not healed up from turf toe. And now he goes up against the Denver defense, meaning he's gonna have to face Patrick Surtain. Ugh. Not a good sign. I would bench him if you could. Start T. Higgins. I know. It was so disappointing last week, starting off with a big goose egg. 8 targets. Those things can barely be called targets. They were not on track. They were in his general direction, but let's not act like it hit him in the hands, guys. Cincinnati is coming off of an awful performance. They need to show out. They're not panicked, but they definitely want to make a statement that they are here. And they're going against a Baltimore team that they need to beat for division purposes. Look for T. Higgins to have a bounce back game. This next one is bad. Sit Drake London. He is on a do not start list until he has proven that he will at least get targets. This man had 1 target. 1 target. The Falcons drafted this kid in the top 10 and you gave him 1 target in week 1. And miss me with that whole, oh, he doesn't care as long as we win. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And if he doesn't care now, he'll care when contract time comes around. He'll care when they're bringing up his stats and talking about how many yards and touchdowns he has and how he helped the team. I'm not saying that he should pout on the sidelines or any of that stuff. But to sit up here and act like this game script would be acceptable all year with one target, you're wild. You're wild. These are wide receivers, guys. They also want to be targeted. One target is disrespectful. You know, lost a doggone mind. Bench him until further notice. Also, keep starting Zay Flowers. He had 10 targets. I know that Mark Andrews is going to come back, but I like this kid. He looked like he was the best wide receiver on the field, and even with Mark Andrews back, I think that that can help him as well. He can still see 7+ targets. I'm keeping him in rotation until proven otherwise. I'd definitely start him over Drake London. Getting on my doggone nerves. And my sleeper for the week, who should no longer be a sleeper, but everybody's sleeping on the man, Nico Collins. My man had 11 targets last week. He goes up against Indy this week, and I think that he is going to have a fine game. I'm starting him this week in one of my leagues. Also, this is just some friendly advice. If you have Garrett Wilson, pay attention. Garrett Wilson is not a sit. He is an amazing player. He is talented, and talent wins out and can make things happen from time to time. But it does change the way that you look at Garrett Wilson. You're not going to bench a player like Garrett Wilson because you never know what can happen. Sometimes talent just wins out. When you have situations like this, where you have a good player that's in a bad matchup / situation with Zach Wilson, expect that he will not perform to the best of his abilities. So when this happens, roster construction becomes more important. You need to look at your opponent and see who you're going against. The simple way to do this is look at their projections. Are they projected to outscore you by a large amount? If that's the case, you may want to surround Garrett Wilson with players that have more upside, like a Tyler Lockett or a Gabe Davis. Someone who can give you a big boom week so that you can still compete. Now on the flip side, if you're projected to win by a lot, you want players that have a good floor, that are definitely going to give you solid amount of points. Fantasy football is all about winning every week. It's 1 week game at a time. Your strategy next week may not be the strategy you have to employ this week. Matchups matter. Who's on your roster matters. Who's on their roster matters. Keep that in mind when you're setting your lineup. It's not always, oh, this player will score more points. It's what do you need this week? If you're guaranteed to win, don't put in a bunch of volatile players. Put in some steady floors. You might want to throw in a couple people with upside as well, but don't go crazy upside downside when they're projected at low points. I'll go into this more later, but I just figured I'd put you on game a little bit. This will also go on my training course. Running backs to start and sit in week 2. This is just a PSA. No one out there should be sitting Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is incredible. Do not bench him. He will bounce back. His next 2 matchups are tough, but you're still gonna start your studs, guys. All right, let's get to some real starts. Start James Cook. I loved how they used him last week against the Jets, who were a very good defense. His numbers don't pop, but I do think that he is a very good option this week. I do like that he is definitely going to be involved in the passing game. Sit Brian Robinson if you can. I throw in the if you can because I know that he is a player that's going to get a lot of volume, but you really didn't draft him very high, so you shouldn't have to play him. And I'm not trying to play any running backs against the Broncos defense. The Broncos defense is incredible. If I don't have to face them, I don't want to face them. I do still expect him to get the carries though. But without a touchdown, this would have been bad last week. Yes, he scored 14 fantasy points. Yes, he finished 15th. But without this receiving touchdown, he would have had a horrible game. Without this one touchdown, that would have taken away the reception, the 7 yards, and the touchdown. That would have given him like 6 points. Wild. So he already wasn't a good start last week. He lucked into a touchdown, which went to him because Antonio Gibson had already fumbled the ball and he was in the doghouse. Hold on to the ball! Yeah, bench Brian Robinson. Start Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think they both can have solid games this week. David Montgomery, because he's clearly getting the rushes. He had 21 rush attempts last week and a touchdown. Touchdown kind of saved him. Jahmyr Gibbs was electric. I think that both of them are going to be very involved in this matchup, and I think you can start them. This should be a good back and forth affair between the Lions and the Seahawks. Got him in my top 20. David Montgomery due to volume, and Jahmyr Gibbs due to pure talent and opportunity. His opportunity should increase as the weeks go on. The part I really like about this, it's a 47-point over-under. That means a lot of points are projected to be scored. I doubled up the starts, now let's double up the sits. I don't want to play Cam Akers or the future starter Kyron Williams. I'm really trying to avoid the Rams players if I can. Those 49ers look serious. That defense is good. And right now, they're splitting work. The reason why people liked Cam Akers was A, because he had a good last stretch, which lasted like 3 games. And B, they saw the volume. I say they because I'm not a Cam Akers believer. But the people that did believe thought that there was nobody in the backfield that could compete with him. Meet the guy that can compete with him. Kyron Williams was in the game when it mattered last week. And then Cam Akers kind of finished the game off when the game was in hand. This game will never be in hand. San Francisco will be leading this game. How much? To be determined. But regardless, I don't want to touch these running backs. Start Tyler Algier. Man, this guy got some work. 15 carries for 75 yards. That's good. And he was involved in a passing game with 3 receptions. Now, the 2 touchdowns really helped him, but like I keep telling you, touchdowns are not a sticky stat. So that is not why I think you should play him. Why I think you should play him is he had 15 carries and 3 receptions. That's 18 touches for a backup running back. This is a solid flex play. Take out the 2 touchdowns, and this is still a solid flex play. Add on to the fact that Green Bay is having injury issues. Aaron Jones is banged up. Christian Watson is banged up. I'm not sure the status on Romeo Doubs, but he was limited last week when they played. There's a chance that Atlanta gets up in this game. And if Atlanta gets up in this game, they will run the ball non-stop. This coach does not like to throw it. He is not a passing fan, which makes me wonder why they drafted Drake London and Kyle Pitts in the top 10 picks in the last 2 years. You're wasting talent. It's annoying, but whatever. They're in our division. I hope that they lose, but I don't think that they will. If you need a flex, start Tyler Algier. I think he has a solid game. 15 carries, 3 targets, pretty solid. Pretty good. Now let's talk about a backfield that everybody's been hot and heavy over. The Baltimore Ravens backfield. What should you be doing about it? With J.K. Dobbins going down, Justice Hill came in and got 2 touchdowns. But touchdowns aren't a sticky stat. So will he be the guy that's involved? He had 8 carries for 9 yards. That's bad. That's really bad. And then you got Gus Edwards, who had 8 carries for 32 yards. And the team said that Melvin Gordon is probably going to get on the field. What I think you should do with this backfield? Leave him on your bench. I know some of y'all paid major fab to get them, or that you used your waiver claim on them, but I would not start them this week. You are rolling the dice until we know who the guy actually is. If there is one guy, they could just go to a committee. Until we figure that out, I'm not starting him. And lastly, Najee Harris isn't a sit per se, but I think he scores low points in this game. I don't think that you have to sit him, but I think that you should build your lineup knowing you're not getting a boom game from Najee Harris. Browns defense could be pretty good. Tight ends to start and sit for week 2. This was obvious, but it's just to build confidence. Like, I think you should really start this guy. Darren Waller, I know he didn't have a great week last week. He only scored 7 points, but the team played like trash. I think that he has a much better game this week. I know that you were probably already starting him. The hamstring injury was making some people nervous. I just wanted to reassure you, I personally will be starting him, and I think you can start him too. All right, now back to some players that are up in the air. Start Hunter Henry. Yes, I know he was the #1 tight end last week because of the touchdown, but I also like that he had 6 targets. 5 receptions for 56 yards. And what I really like is that opponent. They're going against Miami. Miami slings the ball. There is a chance that the Patriots are down in this game and need to come back. Give me the biggest weapon you got, Hunter Henry. This isn't a sit because the tight ends are so thin, but limit your expectations for Kyle Pitts. He only had 3 targets last week. Green Bay is missing a lot of players, and if the Falcons get up, all they're going to do is run the ball, and Kyle Pitts is going to have very limited work. This is really disappointing, but pass catchers for the Falcons are like this. That's why I don't draft them. You don't have to bench them because there aren't a bunch of tight ends out there, but I would limit your expectations for having a big game. I got 3 sleeper tight ends that may help you win your week. Sam Laporta, tight end for the Detroit Lions. He had 5 targets, 5 receptions for 39 yards. He looks like he's going to get involved on this team. He plays Seattle. I think this should be a back and forth affair. I think you can fire him up. Next up, Luke Musgrave. He only had 3 receptions last week for 50 yards, but with all the injuries going on in Green Bay, I think that Luke Musgrave may be one of the last men standing. Fire him up if you're desperate at tight end. I actually like the matchup as well. Atlanta does not scare you. This last one is more of a long shot, but somebody I want to keep on my radar. I don't think that this matchup is the best, but I do think that he should be on rosters. Jake Ferguson is the tight end for the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas likes to use their tight ends, and they targeted him. A decent amount for a tight end. He had 7 targets. Now, that only turned into 2 receptions for 11 yards, and he goes up against the Jets this week, so I'm really not saying to start him, but he is definitely on notice. He should be watched and rostered if you have an extra spot or questionable tight end situation. Defenses I love in week 2. The New Orleans Saints. They're going up against the Carolina Panthers and a rookie quarterback. Give me the Saints all day. I think they're going to eat. This next one was the worst defense in the league last week. But it's all about the matchups, baby. The New York Giants. Gosh, they were -1 last week. They allowed 40 points and they did nothing. No sacks, no interceptions, no fumbles, no safeties, no nothing. But now they go up against the Arizona Cardinals. I love that for them. This is not a must win for the Giants, but they really, really want this one. They were embarrassed last week at home. They are going to go to Arizona and try to dominate the Cardinals. They need this win bad for morale purposes, if nothing else. You can't get shut out in the Mecca and not hear about it. New York City is a media-driven city. They are hearing about it everywhere. They want that mess to stop. And to make it worse, it was the Dallas Cowboys that did it to them. Oh, Lord. They want to make up for that, trust me. This team might have been dropped on your waiver wire. The Denver Broncos. They only had 3 fantasy points last week going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. But I do think that Washington is a good matchup for them. Their offense does not scare me, and this defense is very good. Plus, Terry McLaurin's still a little banged up. I think this is going to be a turnover machine. Start Denver Broncos. And if you're desperate, you can start the team on the other side, too. The Washington Commanders going up against Denver. Denver is not a great offense. Russell Wilson is still meh. And the run game is coming around, but it's no Derrick Henry with the Titans. They don't scare me. I think if you're in a pinch, you can play Washington. You can also play them Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against Chicago. The Bucks going against the Bears. Yes, Justin Fields is a good runner, but he also turns the ball over. The Bucks are probably going to get a fumble, an interception, and the over-under is 41. That means Vegas thinks it's going to be low scoring. You can start the Bucks defense. That'd be all right. Now that you know who to start and sit for this week, this is the last chance you're going to have to trade for players that underperformed in week 1. People freak out after week 1 performances. You want to capitalize. Click here if you want to know what players I think you should go after. I'll see you soon.